Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I'd like to rise just to make a few more comments on the debate around submarines and Australia's future submarine capability. I'll reiterate up front the 3 points that I continuously make. One, that it must be fit for purpose. It must have the range that we need, it must have the combat system that can integrate with our allies, and it must have the Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo, for all the reasons that we currently maintain that capability in conjunction with the USN. And at the moment, I repeat the fact, inconvenient as it may be for some pundits, that there is nothing off the shelf that meets those requirements. Secondly, we must have the sovereign ability to maintain the submarines here. And that's not just changing the oil and tweaking up some loose nuts. It's talking about design assurance. And importantly, in a system like a submarine, which is a safety critical system, it includes the certification process to actually certify it as being safe for work. And having come from an aerospace background, where a large part of my work running Australia's flight test organisation for many years was around certification of aircraft and proving them both fit for purpose and safe for operation, I understand that that is no small task to maintain that sovereign ability. And if there is anything we have learned from both the Coles review and the Rizzo review into the collapse of Navy's amphibious capability in the case of Rizzo, and the poor availability of the submarines in the case of the Coles review, it is that we must maintain that sovereign capability to do that design assurance and to manage that whole of enterprise logistic and engineering and certification process for the capability. Third element is that the government has a duty to find the way that is the lowest risk but the most economically sensible to do that. And I would like to discuss a little bit about why achieving that second point of the sovereign capability to maintain, which means also the certification design engineering or design assurance, could well be that the most economically sensible and lowest risk option is to have a build program here in Australia. Since the Treaty of Westphalia, the notion of sovereignty comes to the ability of a government, of a sovereign government, to make decisions that are in the best interest of their people. And I've often used aerospace as an example. A nation which is, if you like, an aerospace superpower in terms of its ability to design, to build, to repair and modify and certify everything they need is a country like the United States. There's a whole raft of other countries, including China, Italy, India, Brazil, the UK, France, who to a greater or lesser extent build, design, certify aircraft, right through to third world nations who have none of that capacity nor competence and essentially are takers of what somebody else is prepared to give them or sell them, and they need a lot of support in order to maintain it. So in terms of sovereignty, you have quite a spectrum there. Now, Australia has no pretensions of being a superpower in terms of sovereignty with aerospace, but nor do we want to be, and I would argue certainly from a national security perspective, nor can we afford to be at the third world end of that spectrum, which means we need to have not only training but also opportunities for young graduates, whether they be tradesmen or whether they be engineers. We need opportunities for them to develop the competence to be able to exercise those design assurance and those fabrication and manufacturing skills and to develop the capacity that Australia needs. Now, some people have used aerospace as an example to say, well, you never need to build here because let's have a look at things like the F-35 or the Super Hornet or the C-17 and the fact that we've bought those through a foreign military sales off the shelf from the US and we didn't build them and yet we operate them here. What they are overlooking are a number of differences but also a number of false assumptions. I'd like to just address those as it applies to this issue around the submarines. The first false assumption is that what we have now is a system that is sustainable into the future for aerospace. And my argument, based on a career in this area, is that at the moment our ability to do the design assurance, do the maintenance of the capability from a whole of enterprise perspective in aerospace is drawing on the legacy capability Australia has built up under both sides of politics over several decades. At the moment, because of decisions, and again by both sides of politics, to pursue in order to reduce risk and reduce upfront purchase cost, foreign military sale after foreign military sale after foreign military sale, we are actually eroding that base, particularly in an environment where at the same time as civil aerospace sector, because of developments in design and reliability, are seeing a great decline in Australian engineering and support manufacturing here in country, our national sovereign ability to maintain aerospace assets is actually declining. And it is not sustainable into the future if we continue just to buy off the shelf through FMS or MOTS sales. It's military off the shelf. There are also a number of examples where we've gone down that path, where we have had to, in order to A, be cost effective, but more importantly, to actually keep equipment online and available, we've had to bring back to Australia things that were originally conceived could all be done by the host country, in terms of repair parts of engines and avionics and other supplies, and in terms of the ability to do design assurance around those assets. And so aerospace, yes, at the moment there are some things that are still working, but it's drawing down a bank account that we have failed to invest in for a number of years. And if we, off the low base that we see coming from Coles and the low base that we see coming from Rizzo, attempt to do the same thing with the submarines, which are equally complex, in fact some would argue more complex than advanced aerospace, for example fighter jets, then we will be in a world of hurt in terms of being a sovereign nation and an ability to determine what we want to do with that capability into the future. The other large difference is scale. For something like the Joint Strike Fighter or the CF-15, there are worldwide fleets of almost identical configuration, and so you have a number of users, many of whom are happy to cooperate with spiral upgrade programs. And so there is a body of knowledge which is available, supplemented with what I've said is our residual ability that we are managing. And there are good arguments for that, but we do need to reinvest to keep that sovereign ability going. One of the differences with submarines is that the fleets are very small. And according to TKMS, when I visited there in 2012 and spoke to them about some of these issues, they have argued cogently that, based on their experience with a whole range of customers, that certainly every fleet, if not indeed almost every individual boat, is different. There are differences in design and configuration and modification status, and so the authority who is operating that boat must have access to all the design artefacts. They need to understand the certification of components, the status of welds in the boat, understand what each element represents in terms of a systems engineering approach. And that is something, based on the experience we've had in the last decade of aerospace, you can't just send off to someone else, because sure as night follows day, the situation will arise where you need to make your own sovereign decisions about repairs, modification or certification, because the host country's politics, their priorities, or indeed just their resources, as we've seen with our very best ally, the United States, when their priorities are different to ours, their resources go to their needs first, not to ours, and we've seen that in the past. In terms of value for money, one of the best ways to achieve the opportunity to grow the skills of our tradesmen and grow the skills of our engineers is to actually do the work. One of the best ways to have a supply chain that is capable of supporting the boats is to do the work. And we see through the work of people like Professor Jeroen Roos, very well quantified examples of where, when you do complex defence procurement, having done the work onshore, the flow back, the spillover to the economy means the net cost to the economy, the net cost to the nation, rather than being $20 or $25 billion that we've spent somewhere overseas, the net cost is probably in the order of around $3 to $4 billion because of the money that comes back into the economy. And there are many good documented examples in Sweden, Germany, the UK and the US where that is proven. Australia needs a sub that's fit for purpose. It needs the sovereign ability to be able to maintain it. And contrary to many critics, the the most cost-effective way to do that is most likely to do it here.